Arabs are getting sick and tired of the narrative pushed by the ANC and others like it. Here's the truth. So as the Middle East war has waged on, the ANC and some of its government partners have continued to push the same narrative in support of the Iranian regime, in support of the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah, and other members of this axis of resistance, or as I like to call it, the axis of evil. But what they may not realize is that while they think that they're duping South Africans into believing that the Arab world and Iran hates Israel and the United States, they could not be further from the truth. Because right here today, I'm going to show you some evidence of what the Arab people really think, especially when it comes to these forces who have been oppressing them for so long. But before we get into it, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's entirely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below the video. If you would like to support the channel and enjoy some additional perks, you can become a Power Club member. All you have to do is click on the join button below. Now let's get into it. So while everybody seems to be quite fixated on what's going on in Iran at the moment, it's also important to note that another front of the war has opened up, specifically along the Israel-Lebanon border. And Israel is currently fighting against Hezbollah. Now, what's actually quite important to note is that, yes, most of us already know that the majority of ordinary Iranians are against the regime. But what people might not know about Lebanon is the fact that the majority of the Lebanese people are not against Israel, but rather against Hezbollah. And this is becoming more and more evident as people continue to speak out, especially now that the war is underway. And so first of all, I'd like to show you a clip from the Lebanese justice minister explaining the government's official position.
Your government is taking quite a hard line on Hezbollah. Your president has said there's a ban, he's announced a ban on all Hezbollah military actions, but they're still fighting. So what can you do? I mean, first of all, what can you do to stop them right now?
No, what is important at the beginning is to explain a little bit that after a long period of time where Hezbollah was installing all its military infrastructure, this government was appointed 1 year ago, and this government took a first decision through the governmental declaration that has been presented to the parliament, where it was clearly stated that the monopoly of the state of the strengths must be given only to the state, and this is a condition to build a state. So this first decision was taken through this declaration, and the declaration was approved by all the ministers, including the ministers close to Hezbollah. And this decision was also presented to the parliament, and the government was granted the confidence of the parliament with MPs pertaining to Hezbollah. The government was granted the confidence. Then the government took another decision to start implementing the monopoly of the strengths in the hands of the states through the army's action. The army provided a plan, and the plan was ongoing before this war erupted.
Okay.
And also after that, there was strikes coming from Israel, and Israel was taking as a pretext the presence of the military infrastructure of Hezbollah. But the position of the state is that in order to build for internal reasons and for the interest of Lebanon, it was very important to implement the monopoly of the weapons. Hezbollah was complicating the process. Hezbollah did not cooperate as much as it should in this process. And by not cooperating, it was clear that Hezbollah was offering also pretexts for Israel to strike on Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And when Hezbollah took the unilateral decision to launch rockets against Israel, they gave also the pretext to Israel to start a large war
Right.
So we were in a process of strikes, and now we are in a full war. It is clear that in order for Lebanon to be able to face Israel in the diplomatical let's field or in diplomacy, Lebanon need to have the decision of war and peace and to have the monopoly of strengths within Lebanon. This is a requirement that we consider as government needed for the sake of Lebanon, for the interest of all the population of Lebanon, and we consider that Hezbollah's action is an obstacle for the government to be able to take all appropriate actions to defend Lebanon's interests.
So there you have it. As explained by the Justice Minister himself, Hezbollah gave the pretext to Israel to enter into this war because it was Hezbollah who decided to stick their heads out and attack Israel, even though there was no war to be had with Israel, and that rather the war was between Israel and the US and Iran. And so ultimately, what did Hezbollah do, as quite eloquently laid out by this Justice Minister, is that they decided to drag Lebanon into this war. Why? Because Hezbollah are IRGC or Iranian regime allies. And so they decided to make the people's lives that much more complicated. And as explained right here by the minister, Lebanon is interested in actually pursuing diplomacy with Israel. However, it is Hezbollah who is ruining this opportunity. And so ultimately, by defeating Hezbollah, Israel would actually be doing Lebanon a big favor, and the government sees that. But this is not the only person to speak out against such behavior. So while the Lebanese government has taken a very strong stance against Hezbollah, so too has the public and even journalists. Now, of course, many South African journalists and those in certain Western countries have decided to ignore a lot of the truth in favor of advancing an agenda. But it seems that the Lebanese people and even the journalists and news stations there cannot remain silent because it is their survival at stake. And here we have an article from Nida Al-Watan, which is one of the most popular newspapers in Lebanon. So using Google Translate, I'm just going to translate this for us. And what we see here is something that is quite telling. You see, here's a political party in Lebanon called the Kataib Party, and they themselves have decided to call out Hezbollah, saying Hezbollah's adventures, as they call it, bring nothing but destruction, isolation, and collapse to Lebanon. So let's see what they said. So it explains here that the Foreign Relations Department of the party condemned in the strongest terms the terrorist plot that targeted the sisterly United Arab Emirates and denounced in no uncertain terms any involvement or participation by Hezbollah in these acts. Now, it's important to notice that it's believed that there are terror cells, including Hezbollah members, which infiltrated the UAE, which of course is against Iran in this specific war. And it's also important to note that the UAE does actually have peace and full diplomatic relations with Israel, as was determined in the Abraham Accords. Now, what's really interesting here is that in the past, many parties were quite scared of Hezbollah. They knew that that's the party, the political party, with a lot of military might due to its armed faction as well. And so they were oftentimes quite silent when it came to such matters. But clearly, a lot of the political opposition, as well as journalists, are sick and tired of this narrative, and they really want to get rid of Hezbollah once and for all. Another particularly interesting article from Nida Al-Watan is this opinion piece by one of its senior journalists. And this is very interesting because, as you can see, it's titled Human Shields, When Lebanese Lives Become a Tool in Iranian Military Strategy. And this is so interesting because human shields are often what it's believed Hamas has been using in the Gaza war. Now, Israel has leveled this accusation at them, and you still get a lot of Hamas or anti-Israel actors who will say, oh, it's a lie, it's nonsense. But here we have Lebanese people themselves accusing Hezbollah, which is a Hamas partner, of the exact same strategy. So as explained here, It is no longer possible to treat what is happening in Lebanon as merely a military confrontation on the southern border. What is happening today is the transformation of Lebanon, its people, its state, and its institutions into a battleground in a regional conflict led by Iran. The article continues to explain that Lebanon today is being used as an arena for a broader regional project. Hezbollah, which is essentially created under the auspices of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, more popularly known as the IRGC, has never concealed the nature of its relationship with Tehran. Its leadership has repeatedly declared that funding, weapons, and strategic decision-making come from Iran. This means that the decision to wage war, which is devastating Lebanon, is not a decision of the Lebanese state or the will of its people, but rather part of Iran's forward defense lines. And so here we see how they've been accused of using human shields, which is ultimately trying to get Lebanese people to experience casualties in the war, and that's to ultimately advance their propaganda machine. And furthermore, it's quite clear here that the Lebanese people understand that Hezbollah is part of the Iranian network and that decision-making often comes from Iran, specifically Tehran, and that ultimately Hezbollah has dragged Lebanon into this war, which has devastated its people, its economy, and its society as a whole. I also wanted to share with you this ex-post from a leading Lebanese journalist by the name of Tony Bullos. And he explains, repeal of the boycott Israel laws. The House of Representatives must abolish the system of boycott Israel laws, which have become nothing more than a blatant embodiment of a backward, regressive mentality that keeps Lebanon captive to the past and prevents it from entering the modern era. These are not sovereign laws, but political shackles that bind the state. Continuing with them is no longer a principled stance, but a deliberate insistence on keeping Lebanon hostage to political and economic backwardness, isolating it from any realistic path to rescue and openness. These laws have been used as a repressive weapon to fabricate cases and pursue Lebanese citizens from the era of Syrian tutelage to the dominance of Hezbollah, depriving thousands of expatriates from returning to their country under loose pretexts that serve the control apparatus, not Lebanon's interest. Liberating Lebanon starts here, abolishing these outdated laws and breaking the backward mentality that govern the state. For there can be no reform or sovereignty while tools of repression remain cloaked in false slogans. So here we have a journalist who's not only saying that Hezbollah needs to be defeated, but that they actually need to repeal any boycott of Israel and enter into full diplomatic relations with the Israeli state, as this is in the best interest of the Lebanese people, both politically and economically. Finally, I want to show you this clip of a Lebanese armed forces official who has decided to not only call out Hezbollah, but actually call for full diplomatic relations with Israel, where he even wants the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, to travel to the Israeli parliament and address the people and finally bridge the gap between the two countries. Let's watch.
أنا تفاجأت إنه لما قتلوا الخامنئي اليوم تحرك حزب الله. هيدي لوحدها بتشرد إنه هي نحن اليوم كنا نقوله إنه صح إنه حزب الله فصيل إيراني، حزب الله تابع للحرس الثوري، حزب الله الأساسي عم يندار من الحرس الثوري من السفارة الإيرانية. غرفة العمليات تبع معركة اليوم هي بالسفارة الإيرانية، ومن هان أنا بدعي الجيش اللبناني لتطبيق السفارة الإيرانية واعتقال الدبلوماسية والسفير الإيراني، وكل واحد بيثبت انه هو دمر لبنان لازم يروح على الحبس. من هان انا بدعي الجيش اللبناني لتطبيق السفاره الايرانيه ولقط السفير الايراني بديناي ويتاخذ على التحقيق. بس
بتعمل مشكله دبلوماسيه،
بطل في دبلوماسيه بيننا وبين دوله هي اعتمدت على 20 سنه نحن نقول انه يا شباب انتم عم تدمروا لبنان، وهن يقولوا نحن عم ندعم لبنان بالمال والسلاح. عن الرئيس جوزيف عون يطلع يزور عناية مر شربيل ويروح مطرح ما راح الرئيس انور السادات، يروح على البيت لعندهم، الارض مقابل السلام.
يعني بدك ياخذوا على كنيسه
يروح مطرح ما لازم يروح ويقول لهم الارض مقابل السلام. انا كشاب مسيحي عشت بالحرب وخلقت بالحرب واولادي خلقوا بالحرب واولادي خي، معش مضطر انا موت كرمال حسن نصر الله او كرمال الخامنئي او كرمال مشروع كرمال يدمروا دول الخليج.
The Lebanese people are sick and tired of the war that Hezbollah is dragging them into, just as the Iranian people are sick and tired of the Iranian regime and the IRGC and really just want their country back. And so I say this to all of the ANC, certain partners in the GNU have been silent, as well as certain South Africans who do not understand the truth. Arab, Iranian, and Israeli people are sick and tired of the Iranian regime and its axis of evil. They do not want them anymore. They understand that this group is a terror network that has brought the region down for far too long. And ultimately, they no longer want this in their lives. They no longer want to live in a consistent state of war, but rather be able to have full diplomatic relations, get over this unnecessary hatred, and finally have proper diplomatic solutions that can allow their countries to prosper. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you found it informative, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.